Hello everyone. I'm just going to try to introduce Excel VBA. I'll show you a simple macro that moves data from one cell to another and inputs data in the original cell. And then I'll show you what the environment is like that you have to write the code in and record in. And that's about it. Just a introduction to what is VBA, where do you write the code, how do you access macros, and what is a macro. So a macro is just something you do on a repetitive basis, and you don't want to do it manually with keystrokes. You want to just press a button or do a control keyboard shortcut. So let's write a macro that takes the number in the first cell. Let me change this to date real quick. That'll take the number in the first cell and we'll move it to the bottom cell. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, you go to Tools, you go to Macro, and you go to Record New Macro. So I'm going to show you first in this video simply how to record a macro using the macro editor. In other videos I'll show you how you can write macros, which is really where, if you're going to code in VBA, that's how you're going to do it. You're going to be writing macros. But initially for this video, let's just use the built-in functionality of recording a macro. So let's click record, and now it'll pop up. You could put in a name, any name you want. You could put in a shortcut key, and then you click OK. So what I want to do is take this value, I want to cut it, I want to paste it here. That's what I want to do with my macro. And then in the original cell, I want to put a different number. I don't know. I'll put 3. So that's the macro. Okay, so I'm going to do that every time with this macro. So I'm going to stop recording. That little box that popped up, that's where you press stop. So now the macro is done. It's recorded. You stopped recording, but now you need to find where it's at and what it looks like. What's the code? So you go back to Tools, you go to Macro, you go to Macros now. And you can see here's the macro you just recorded. And you press Step Into, and what pops up is this window that probably looks a little strange. This is the environment that you write your macros in. And if I put up real quick, you can see this is the main window where the macro is written. But what's important here are these two buttons here, the Project Explorer and the Properties window. So what these two buttons do, or what these two areas do, is here is where you can write macro code. Every object in the workbook has an area where you can write code. So every sheet is a sheet is an object, and the workbook is an object. So if you have 10 sheets, you're going to have 10 of these, and then this workbook, where if you double click, you'll get an area. I'll click on sheet 2, and you get a blank area where you could write code. Click on sheet 1, you get another blank area where you can write code. The code for the automatic macro is stored in modules, which is here. So you could see the macro we just recorded is in a module. But what's just important to know is that all this project window is doing is telling you where you can store code. And where I store my code is always in modules. I just like doing it that way because I don't like flipping through the sheets. And then this properties window is just, if you ever thought about hiding a sheet, you can hide a sheet here. So if you want to do visible, not visible, and there's other properties that a sheet will have. And same with a module, just the name. You could change the name. So that is all that the project window does and the properties window does. Very simple, not hard. Just know that here's where you're going to write your code. Usually you do it in a module, and I would suggest if you need to insert a module, just do the insert here. Okay, so now let's go back to the module 1 where this macro 1 was stored, and you can see you have code in green, which is commented out code. So if you want to comment out something, you just put an apostrophe, and then here's the code. So it selected range A1. So range A1.select, selection.cut, range A2.select, ActiveSheet.paste, and then range A1.select, and you put the value in range A1. So what's going on here is you're selecting a cell, you're cutting its contents, you're selecting a new cell, and you're pasting it. And then in the original cell, you're putting the value 3. So it's not really important you don't have to memorize any of this code. You'll just see this more and more as you do VBA. And the most important thing is that when you do range 1 A1.select, you press the period and a whole bunch of things come up. So this is very easy to learn VBA by just scrolling through here and see what you can do. If you want to know what these do, just Google them and put ExcelVBA and then space dot query table if you want to learn about that, or dot replace, and something will pop up that'll show you what that does. Well, most times it's good to just start out using the macro recorder, seeing how things work. And the other thing I'll just note about this macro is that it does formula R1C1, which you can Google and find out what that does, but I think it's better just for the beginning out to do ActiveCell.value equals 3. Okay, so I have a couple minutes left here, and I'm going to show you, once you write code, you probably want to minimize the window, and now you want to step through the code. So you want to see line by line how it works. And the first thing you want to do is go up here and right click on the toolbar and make sure this debug is checked, so you get this debugging toolbar. And there's only 2 buttons that you really need, the play button and the step into button. Step into is what's going to move the code line by line. So if I press this step into, now I'm moving down line by line, and you can see in the workbook in the upper left that things are happening as I move down the code line by line. Okay, let me just change this again. Bring this back up. So that's how you step through the code. If you want to set a breakpoint because you want to see, if you want to see, you might need to press this reset button. So the 3 buttons you really need are play, step through, and reset, because after you run the macro, you got to press reset so you can get back into the code. Let's just show you another thing you could do. So you could step into the code line by line, or you could play it, hit the play button, and it just did it again. Okay. One more thing is you can set a breakpoint. So just on this gray column, I gotta press reset again. In the gray column, click there, and you'll set a breakpoint. And what this will do is, let me put the breakpoint down here. So this will play the macro until it hits that breakpoint, and then you could step through the rest of it. That's all a breakpoint does. And that's about all I wanted to show you today. So let's just quickly recap. To record a macro, you go to Tools, Macro, Record New Macro. A box will pop up with a stop button. You hit stop. You want to see where the macro is. Go back to macros, and you press step into. And then you're here. Then you have where you can write your code and the properties. Most often you just use a project window and you put it in modules. And here's your code, and you could step through the code by the step into button, the play button, and the debug button, and also the reset button when you need to get back into the code. Press that. One more thing is that a sub, you see this sub here, that starts every macro. So every macro needs to start with sub. So sub and then the name of the macro with parentheses, and end sub. All sub stands for is subroutine. So thanks for the video, and please comment.